Today we're going to take a look at the work of Gertrude Fiske. She was a Boston painter, early 20th century, and how she was able to create a mood in her painting by using subtle value and color changes and the ability to keep things very simple. Gertrude Fiske was born in 1879. She died in 1961, and she was one of 6 kids born into a wealthy Boston family. And she had no interest in painting early on in her life, but she was interested in horses and was actually a really good amateur golfer. She won the Amateur Golf Championship of Massachusetts in 1901. Then in 1904, at the age of 25, she enrolled in the School of Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. They had a 7-year course in painting. And her teachers were Frank Benson and also Edmund Tarbell and some other painters as well. But these painters were a member of the Boston School of Painting. And they had an academic approach to drawing and the figure, but an impressionistic approach to brushwork and color. You can see that in these paintings. Very accurate drawing, but very loose brushwork. I just had a nice sense of light using brushwork to show form instead of blending brushstrokes away. And that was the same thing with Gertrude's work. By using subtle value and color changes, as well as keeping her painting free of clutter, she was able to create a mood in her paintings. Her brushwork was very direct. It wasn't fussy or overly blended. You can see in this painting here, it's kind of a self-portrait. That's her in the mirror doing a portrait of this guy. You can see the brushwork is nice and loose. She's not blending away brush strokes and using the brush to show the form, kind of following the form with the brushwork. But the subtle value changes are really interesting in a lot of her paintings. Moving to this one here, you can see the subtle changes within the shadows there, even in the light area. Being able to get those subtle value and color shifts go a long way to show the form and create more interest in the painting. Took me a few minutes to look at this and realize that's a train in the background. I'm assuming this is in a house and you're looking out the window and she's backlit, really suggesting the light really well. And she was also able to use hard and soft edges to make her objects recede or come forward. Today we paint from photographs a lot more often than they did back then, and the camera tends to make all the edges hard. But if you paint outside or you paint from life, still life or a figure, you can see the edge variations a lot better. And she was able to use harder, softer edges to control the form and depth. A nice portrait here. And again, you can see the very loose brushwork, the strong suggestion of light. And by not getting overly picky, the painting's really easier to read. And like a lot of her portraits, there's 2 light sources. There's a light source coming from the left, then a stronger light source on the right, which is a bit warmer. And then the light source on the left is a little bit cooler. But she's able to use, again, the subtle value changes to show real nice form on that head. And really captures a mood in all her paintings by keeping her brushwork looser. The painting's not cluttered. And when we say paint or create a mood in a painting, when you look at a painting, you should feel something. There should be something in the painting that wants you to continue to look at it. There's interest in there. And that's what I mean by mood. And she was able to do that. Where there is no mood or interest in the painting, you really have no interest in looking at it. But she does a great job. Again, it's more the subtle value changes and color changes within her subjects that works really well. And you can see that in some of the portrait paintings. This one also, really interesting composition, a very common scene, just a backyard, but by keeping the shapes big, simple, using color just to focus on suggesting the light, the warm yellow greens, the cooler shadowed greens, the light and dark and warm and cool colors on the house. She's painting what's important and not trying to paint everything she sees, which takes a while to get used to. How to eliminate or get rid of things that don't matter takes some time. But if you enjoy the process, enjoy the practice of it, it does start to make sense after a while. What to leave out and what to put in. So another portrait, again, two different light sources. The stronger light source is on the left this time, and there's a little weaker light source on the right. Figure is backlit for the most part, so it's in shadow with just a little bit of rim lighting on the left side and a smaller amount on the right side. But those subtle shifts in value on the floor and in the background really make it an interesting portrait. It kind of pulls you in a little bit. And you can see the hands, the face, are really more of a silhouette, using the light here just to accent the features slightly. Same thing with the hand. Just a dark and light shape with a few highlights on there to suggest fingers. She really knew how to suggest without overdoing all the detail. It's another portrait here, real strong light source from the right. And always playing off dark against light. She's got the shadow side of the figure, so the background is lighter. Doesn't have, not playing off the contrast here on the right side. Usually does. If we go back here, she's playing off dark against light to make the figure stand out. She is doing that here. She's got, again, two light sources and using a lighter background against the darker side here of her arm and a little bit on her dress. And then on the light side of the dress, using a darker background. So playing off dark and light contrast, or dark and light shapes to create that contrast. And things are usually set up that way. The light side has a darker background, the dark side has a lighter background. But if you're not aware of it, you won't push it even a bit more to create more drama and contrast in the painting. And she really created a lot of drama in her portraits by using the strong dark and light contrast. And yet the brushwork, again, very loose, not tight at all. And the way she simplified things like the head, face, the hands really works well, but not overly done. It's an interesting painting here, figures on the bridge. And instead of painting individual figures like she did here on the left, these two figures, kind of this figure here, the rest of the figures are grouped together. So this looks like 4 figures, but it's all one big shape. And just placing spots of color and highlights or accents in the right place, it reads as a group of figures. And much more interesting than if she outlined each figure and painted each one separately. The nice head here. Again, 2 light sources. Your shadow pattern or shape is right in here on the left eye and the left side of the nose. You got the strong light from a window probably here. See the light coming through the thin part of the ear, very effective. And then a more subtle light on the right side, showing the form on the eye here and the forehead. Those 3 values right there at the top of the eyebrows show that forehead really well. And understanding the planes of the head helps you see the values so much better. Without thinking about the head as a block, having 4 distinct sides to it. Same thing with, all the features, the nose, the eyes, the mouth, they have definite shapes and planes to them. And once you know those planes, they're easier to see and much easier to paint. Another figure here, again, loosely suggested. Background is very simple. Green trees, but you don't have to paint them green. You can use blue and green. It's the shapes and values that I think are more important. You can use whatever colors you want to create more of a different mood. But nice simple shapes here, especially on the dress. I like the brushwork on the dress. A little bit different technique on the painting of the arms and the face and the hair. A little smaller brushwork in there instead of bigger shapes. Like the shadow on the dress, there's some grayish neutral colors in there as well as in some of the green in the flowers. And that allows the stronger colors of the background and the flowers to stand out a bit more. Now this painting, it's not a great image, kind of lose the image a little bit. But nice job again of just suggesting the backlighting on these figures. It's more about dark silhouetted shapes and where the light falls on them than anything else. Certainly not about the detail. There's no mouth, eyes, not much of a nose. It's more about the simple dark and light shapes. And keeping the brushwork on the looser side. She also does, and I'll go back here for this, uses a dark accent to make things look more solid, to stand up a little bit better. You can see it like on the house, this kind of broken line on the edge of the house. You can see some of that on the tree trunks. A little bit of an accent or part of a line. Same thing on the fence. You can see it there at the base of the fence and here. Just small little accents, contours on shapes like roof, houses, trees, fences, just to make them look more solid. Here, a nice pattern of dark and light with the tombstones and the road winding you back and around the tree or up the tree, back around. Interesting composition, not a real common subject. So to me, that's more interesting that it's a different view of things, but she has a real strong composition and strong, simple value shapes to make it work. Because it's not about being able to render a lot of detail to make things look believable. It's about being able to suggest the form and the light on an object. And I think being able to do that with as little detail as possible so that the painting is easier to read. Another interesting subject is figures on a hillside. I like the subtle color changes in the yellow-green of the grass. Even in the shadows, a lot of violet with some green, not just green shadows. Violet emphasizing maybe the cool temperature of the shadows a lot more. A nice strong color, but also a lot of muted color also that allows the stronger color to stand out. It's an interesting street scene from a window. And again, suggesting light. A lot more detail in here, but it's not tight detail. It's loosely rendered and suggested. The windows are just suggested by painting a few windows instead of every one. As long as you get the perspective right on the angles of the building and the shapes proportionally right, it's always going to work. Using softer edges in the back to make things recede. It's an interesting beach scene, a lot going on. Again, suggesting the figures instead of being so literal with them. If we zoom in here, you can see the figures just barely suggested. A little bit of that outline every once in a while to make things read, look a little bit more solid. But good suggestion of the figures. And the figures are dark against a lighter background. That's the main thing, is getting the value shapes right. Then color-wise, it doesn't matter. Keep the colors cooler in the shadow, a little warmer in the sunlight. I do like the biplane back in here, zooming in, getting ready to buzz the crowd. Another portrait here. She's playing off, the dark background and the light coat. And here's the dark coat against the light background. the light side of the face against a darker background, looking for those patterns of dark and light to create more contrast. And the shadows, most of her paintings, the shadows are very simple. All the work is done in the light areas and keeping the shadows more simple because you can't see into the shadows as well. Now I'm going to go to just a kind of a step-by-step demonstration of looking at something cluttered, like painting the portraits she painted or some of the landscapes that are more cluttered, and how to simplify them to make them more paintable. And I was in Noonan, Georgia a couple of years ago. I'm doing some painting around town, and I wanted to paint this alley. It's the courthouse dome through the alley. I liked the light and the shapes. Even the clutter, I think, is interesting in the alley. Stair steps here, the railing, the windows, the trash cans, the power lines. I think all that is interesting to me, but I want to suggest it and not be too tight with it, and being able to eliminate what I think is not important. So the first step, and I photographed this outside, so a little bit of glare, but first step is just to find the dark and light patterns, shadow pattern, the light pattern. And I don't want to do that with too much outline. You know, I might put a line or two down first, just maybe to place the walls, but as soon as I can get the big shape, the better. And I'm using just two values of dark. I could use all just one dark, it doesn't matter. You know, don't break it up too much. I think I started with this lighter shadow. It's just burnt sienna and paint thinner. I did tone the board first with burnt sienna. And then I'm using burnt sienna just to fill in the shape of the walls. This is all shadow in here. The background, the dome, the two walls on either side, the alley, the street. It's all in shadow. So I want to suggest those and get a little value variation within the shadow, separates them a little bit, but as big and as simple as possible. Then the next step, I can start to break that up. There's a lighter shadow of whatever that building is back in there. And to me, it's just a shape and a value. I have to get the right value compared to these darker shapes of the buildings. And then the roof also, it's a muted neutral color. So I don't have to match the color I see in the reference. It's just a warm gray, a little darker and lighter. So I'm just using blue and orange to create a neutral color. And having the dark, I haven't painted in the light yet. And then as I move on, again, keeping things very simple, adding some darker accents, some lighter shadows for windows, gradually start to break it up, adding some color change within the burnt sienna. Here I have alizarin crimson in burnt sienna with some blue in it to cool it down. Again, another neutral color for the street. I see it as a darker, cool neutral. So, you know, it could be violet and yellow ochre. It could be blue and green. I'm sorry, green and red, which are complements. They make a gray or a neutral. Orange and blue is my typical complementary color scheme that I use to create neutral colors. And I can push the blue to make it cooler or the orange to make it a little bit warmer. Now I'm going in with simple brush stroke and adding a sense of some of the detail of the trash cans, some darker accents, some lighter shadow, some brighter lights in front and in back. Then this is the final stage here. And I'm separating the sunlit areas where the sun is hitting the buildings and the sidewalk and the roof back in here. Keeping that simple, not getting too much detail anywhere, with the exception of in the alley where all the detail is, but still I'm eliminating, and I'm just suggesting a brush stroke for whatever the clutter is down here, boards and paper or whatever's littering up the alleyway to give it some interest. and just trying to suggest what I see there without being too literal. And being there on the spot, I can see more subtlety than I can in the photograph. I can also see where edges would work more softer or harder. Because when you're outside, when you're seeing the real thing, you're focusing on one area. Like this is my focal point right in here. And out of my peripheral vision, I can see what gets softer as it moves away from there. So I can soften edges a lot more farthest away from the focal point. Trying to keep things simple. And again, trying to create a mood in there that I want to show. And you can best show that, again, by simplifying and eliminating what's not necessary. We'll see you all next time.